The classroom fell silent, but not out of respect. It was silence born from shock, broken only by the cruel snickers of a few students who had crossed a line no one dared before. At the center stood Miss Daniels, the new black teacher, her shirt torn at the shoulder by a group of boys who thought humiliation was entertainment. Their arrogance filled the room, but what they didn't know was that Miss Daniels carried more than lessons in literature. She carried discipline, strength, and a past that had prepared her for moments exactly like this. The tables were about to turn. When Miss Simone Daniels walked into her first teaching assignment at Willow Creek High, she carried the weight of dreams bigger than herself. Raised in a community that often reminded her of limits rather than possibilities, she had fought for every degree, every achievement, every opportunity that finally led her here. Teaching wasn't just a job. It was her way of giving back, of being the role model she had once needed but rarely found in her own classrooms. The school, however, was not the fresh start she expected. Nestled in a suburban town with its glossy football stadiums and polished corridors, Willow Creek had a reputation for academic excellence, but also for its unspoken divisions. Few black teachers had walked its halls, and fewer had lasted long. The students, though bright on paper, had been raised in homes where whispers of superiority were still dinner table talk. Miss Daniels noticed the stares on her very first day, the way some parents tightened their lips during open house, the way a few students tested boundaries, not by refusing to do work, but by pushing to see how far they could undermine her authority. She brushed it off, telling herself it was part of being new. But deep down, she felt the resistance wasn't about inexperience. It was about her presence. Still, she came prepared. Years of training in not just academics, but self-defense shaped her calm. Long before she was a teacher, she had been an athlete, trained in Judo as a child by her father who believed discipline was armor. She never thought those skills would matter inside a classroom, but soon she would learn otherwise. It started small. Snickers when she turned to write on the board, whispered jokes passed in folded notes, a mysterious textbook vanishing from her desk. Miss Daniels responded with calm authority, never raising her voice, never showing them the frustration simmering beneath. But in classrooms, cruelty rarely stays small. It grows, testing limits until it finds breaking points. One afternoon, the line was crossed. A group of 3 boys, athletes, popular, untouchable in their own minds, decided that mocking wasn't enough. They waited until Miss Daniels walked past their row, her focus on helping a quiet student struggling with equations. That's when it happened. One boy grabbed the hem of her shirt, yanking hard enough to tear the fabric at her shoulder. The laughter that followed wasn't nervous. It was sharp, cruel, and meant to cut. The classroom froze, eyes darting between teacher and bullies. No one moved to stop them. For many, it was safer to stay silent. And silence, as Miss Daniels knew too well, often became the ally of injustice. Her mind raced, not with panic, but with memory. She remembered her father's voice in the backyard telling her that strength wasn't just about power, it was about control. She remembered every competition where restraint was as important as victory. And most of all, she remembered the countless times she had been told she didn't belong. Those memories didn't weaken her, they steeled her. Miss Daniels straightened, her eyes locking on the boys, unflinching. The room felt different now, the air heavy, charged. The bully smirked, misinterpreting her calm for fear. But behind her composure was calculation. She knew this wasn't just about fabric. It was about dignity, respect, and survival in a space designed to push her out. The tension stretched, every second heavier than the last. Students leaned forward, some eager for spectacle, others praying it wouldn't escalate. But escalate it would, because Miss Daniels wasn't about to let this moment define her as another teacher driven away. The lead bully leaned back in his chair, smug, arms crossed as if he owned the room. His friends grinned, emboldened. That's when he muttered a word, not loud enough for all to hear, but sharp enough to cut through Miss Daniels like a blade. It wasn't just a word, it was a slur. Something in the atmosphere snapped. In one fluid motion, Miss Daniels stepped forward. The bully, unprepared for resistance, found his wrist locked in a grip he couldn't shake. In the next instant, the room blurred as Miss Daniels pivoted, her years of judo training unleashing with precision. His body lifted, flipped, and landed on the floor with a thud that echoed louder than any insult he had thrown. Gasps erupted. Chairs scraped. His friends rushed forward, but their arrogance dissolved the moment she redirected their clumsy attempts. One by one, they found themselves grounded, not injured, but stunned into silence. The class that once had mocked now sat frozen, wide-eyed as their untouchable heroes lay on the floor, defeated not by brute strength, but by skill, discipline, and the resolve of a woman they underestimated. For the first time, the classroom wasn't ruled by fear or cruelty. It was ruled by respect, commanded not through yelling or threats, but through undeniable proof that Miss Daniels was not someone to be broken. She stood tall, her torn shirt no longer a symbol of humiliation, but of resilience. The bullies had tried to strip her of dignity. Instead, they had revealed her unshakable strength. The aftermath rippled far beyond the walls of that classroom. Administrators rushed in after hearing the commotion. Students whispered about what they had witnessed, a story retold in hallways and cafeterias. For some, it was entertainment. For others, it was a revelation. They had seen arrogance crumble. They had seen a woman stand unbroken in the face of cruelty. The boys, once untouchable, were suspended, forced to confront consequences that privilege had long shielded them from. Their parents protested, of course, arguing about overreaction, but the evidence was undeniable. And though the incident could have ended Ms. Daniels' career, it didn't. Instead, it strengthened her standing. She wasn't the teacher to be pushed out. She was the teacher who stood her ground. For Ms. Daniels, the victory wasn't in the throw. It was in the silence that followed, the silence of realization, of respect earned the hard way. She hadn't wanted violence. She hadn't wanted spectacle. She had only wanted to teach. But sometimes life demands that dignity be defended, not asked for. Years later, students who had once been bystanders would recall that day. They would remember the sound of arrogance hitting the floor and the sight of a teacher who refused to bow to injustice. Some would say it was the moment they learned courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes stands quietly until provoked, then rises with unstoppable force. And perhaps that is the lesson that lingers longest, that strength is not in power alone, but in discipline, that respect is not given freely, but earned through resilience, and that injustice, no matter how deeply rooted, can be challenged, sometimes in a classroom, sometimes in a moment of silence shattered by courage. So ask yourself, if dignity were torn from you in front of the world, would you have the strength to stand unbroken?